Welcome to Mobility for Creativity, everybody. Nice having you here. Organizers of today's event, Motovila Institute, and our partner, Touring Artists, invited internationally acclaimed experts to contribute possible answers to questions on how and why the culture and creative sectors should continue work across borders. While the world is increasingly affected by the second wave of the pandemic, with closed borders and international mobility completely stopped for the cultural and creative sectors, also within Europe, Motovila Institute, Touring Artists, and our partners believe that now is the right moment to contribute to a process of rethinking international mobility. Rethinking mobility from the perspective of the culture and creative sectors professionals, as well as decision makers, in order to be able to imagine a more sustainable and safe mobility in the future, when mobility will be possible again, of course. We are honored that today our guests will contribute to this discussion, share their thoughts, insights, prospects on international mobility in a new world, as well as relevant information on forthcoming mobility opportunities for these sectors. Motovila is deeply committed to supporting international cooperation and mobility of the culture and creative sectors, and this work would not be possible without ourselves being deeply connected across borders. Firstly, as a member of Creative Europe Desk Network, national entry points for the EU Creative Europe program, spanning over 41 European countries, and secondly, since 2019, also as a member of On the Move International Mobility Information Network, also partner of this event. Including over 50 member organizations and individuals in Europe and beyond. And since recently, also a proud associate member of Mobility Info Points, available in several European countries and one also in the United States, who aim to provide information and support on mobility issues. And before I pass the floor to our moderator, Jana Grunewald from Touring Artists, and our panelists, of course, let me make a final remark. Today's event happens 1 year after the conference Mobility for Creativity that Motovila organized in 2019, live in Ljubljana. Only a year ago and yet so distant. Back then, among others, we were discussing sustainability issues related to the international mobility. Our keynote speaker, Lučka Kajfeš-Bogataj, a renowned pioneering climatologist, called for urgent institutional, infrastructural, economic, technological, and social innovations. But she also expressed back then her doubts on how humanity could rapidly and effectively limit international mobility, and especially transport in all sectors, in order to secure the future of our planet. Today, we have a COVID edition of Mobility for Creativity, and we are bitterly aware of the factors that can instantly terminate international mobility, at least for the culture and creative sectors, I'm afraid. I'm looking forward to today's discussion that can provide a piece in the puzzle constituting a different mobility of the future. And Jana, if you are there, yeah, please, I'm passing the floor to you and wish you all a great and interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Mateja, for the introduction. So welcome everybody from my side as well. My name is Jana Grunewald, as Mateja said, and I welcome you on behalf of Touring Artists. And Touring Artists is a project realized by the German Center of the ITI, the International Theatre Institute, the IGBK, the International Association for Fine Arts, and the Dachverband Tanz Deutschland, which is the German Dance Association. We host the meeting today together with Motovila, as Mateja said, within the frame of the mobility information points that Mateja mentioned already. And we quickly like to explain what the mobility info points actually are and why we want to follow up on Motovila's conference of last year. So mobility information points provide information and advice, administrative questions and challenges that artists and cultural professionals can face when working across borders. So if you're an artist, a producer, an organizer who works across borders or who collaborates with international partners, you probably know how many issues might arise that make your mobility a very challenging endeavor on an administrative level. So who has to pay taxes in which country, how to apply for a visa or a working permit, what happens to health insurance, social security contributions, other insurances when working abroad, and how to deal with customs and copyright, or where to look for funding opportunities for your international project or your international activity. So these are the questions and the topics that mobility info points aim to tackle in order to facilitate the international mobility of artists and other cultural professionals. So yeah, this is our main aim, to facilitate international mobility by giving information and advice. And as Mattea said, there are several mobility info points in Europe and one in the USA. And as mobility info points, we are all members of On the Move, the Cultural Mobility Information Network. And it's great that Marie-Le Sur is here and will speak to us later on. And you'll also find a link, my colleague Christine Hemsot from Touring Artists, she will post a link with more information about the mobility info points. So for those who are following us in the webinar, you will see it in the chat. The information and advice we give, a very important point, I think, is free of charge. And due to our broad networks, we can offer quite a comprehensive support on an administrative level. And we also cooperate amongst us mobility information points to share information in order to optimize our services and keep up to date at all times. Moreover, we understand ourselves also as players at a national and also at an international level who advocate for better conditions for artists and cultural professionals who work internationally, and also for breaking down the obstacles of international mobility. But obviously, as Mattea mentioned already, we are also aware of the negative effects that our highly intense mobility causes. So negative effects on the environment, on our health, on societal factors, etc. And the pandemic now seems to be like a turning point in this regard. The voices become louder to rethink mobility, to look for alternative ways of working together internationally. And we as mobility info points are having a close look at these developments and these arguments. And we do ask ourselves these days if we are in a mission conflict here. Because on the one hand, we strongly believe in the importance of international mobility, obviously, and we aim to facilitate international mobility. And on the other hand, we know that we have to rethink mobility due to several reasons. So now that we are being forced to rethink mobility due to the pandemic, it is all the more important to discuss this topic together with artists, with mobility promoters, with other colleagues in the field. So this is why we are here today and why we organized this conference in the frame of the mobility info points. And I'm glad that Marie-Le Sur and Ellen Quireyns are with us to share their observations on mobility in the new normal and inform us about new funding schemes and funding opportunities. And I'm also glad to have Danilo Milovanović and Rafaële Giovanola with us, two artists who share their personal experiences with us and also their demands and requests to see how we can rethink mobility. Before we start, a few technical aspects for the people, especially who join us through the webinar. During the event, you'll see only our guests on the podium. But we strongly would like to encourage you, so the people in the audience, to contribute to the discussion by using the Q&A function. You see it on the bottom of your screen. And yeah, we kindly ask you to post your questions and comments there, and we'll pick them up and try to include them in the discussion as best as we can. Yeah, for your info, we are recording the session, but this shouldn't keep you from posting questions and comments. We will keep them anonymous unless you clearly state your name with your question or comment. Otherwise, it will stay anonymous. So please feel free to join at any times. Before I hand over the word to Marie, I just quickly give an outline of the structure of the event. So Marie Lesourd from OTM will start. She will share her observations on mobility today and on a few new formats of mobility funding schemes. And we'll do a very, very short Q&A afterwards, if there are direct questions. And then Alan Quireyns from the Goethe Institute, he'll inform us about the i-Portunus project and the upcoming open calls, followed again by a very short Q&A. And then Danilo Milovanović, a visual artist, and Rafaële Giovanola from CocoonDance will share their thoughts on the importance of mobility and their personal experiences of the changed mobility today. And then we'll dive into a joint discussion, and we'll also open up for questions and comments by people in the audience. So, yeah, and if there are any questions, anything unclear, you can always use the Q&A function. Marie, the word is yours. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Jana, for this introduction, and thank you also to touring artists to be a partner together with Motovila for this event. I have to say that on a personal level, 1 year ago I couldn't make it, so I sent a video. This year we are online, so hopefully next year. So sometime, as we know, a time frame with the international work can take also a lot of time. So I will do a very kind of brief presentation about On the Move, and part 3, of course, with a focus on the type of information that we have been signposting, or that we are also going to promote and to produce in relation to the support of artists and cultural professionals. Yeah, I wanted to open this short presentation with this statement, because sometimes some people who are like followers of On the Move on Facebook, or who are also subscribing to our newsletters, they say, oh, you know, like despite the context, when I still receive every month the newsletter of On the Move, I still think that, yes, there are still a form of opportunity, which are sometimes like delayed or which are revamped as well. And I mean, we notice as well that more than ever, I mean, we never had so many subscribers and readers of the newsletter. So I think that more than ever, maybe it means as well that people are still very much in the need of international collaboration and exchange, and more than ever, and I think it will be also a point of our conversation, it's also a time to rethink as well the motivation behind mobility, and not to forget that for many artists and cultural professionals, not only in Europe, but also internationally, mobility is first part of an economic necessity. Because for instance, the internal market for your work is not enough, or maybe because they are not like the structure to support your work or the kind of discipline that you are doing. So I think it's also quite important to remind that. I just wanted to share as well, I mean, this is not, so it's kind of preview information. At the end of the year, we will publish online a report of the trends that we have been identifying, and particularly my colleague John Ellingsworth, who is working particularly on communication for On the Move, has been very much following. So this one is very a short extract of what we have been noticing, particularly between March and June. So now we need also to compile information with the more recent, also like, or I would say trends, but also context, because end of June, we were, at least in many countries in Europe, like going in, you know, post-confinement, and now we are lockdown in many countries as well. So we need also to analyze that better. But yes, indeed, for those of you who know On the Move, so we are this mobility information network, and our main mission is to provide information about mobility opportunities, be it for touring, residency, training, collaboration in a cross-border way in Europe and internationally. So we are not a founder of mobility, but we are trying as much as possible to signpost information. So usually the information that we have on our website is very, very easy to catch, I would say. It's the name of the call, into bracket the country, and after description and the deadline. And after, if you want more information, you go to the website. So of course, into bracket now, more and more since March, we have this online. We used to have it a bit. I mean, there were already some kind of web-based residency or some online training, for instance, but not to this extent, of course. However, we can already notice that behind this online type of new country, you find in a way the same type of country, which are already the most important country in terms of mobility funding. So I mean, I don't like so much to divide Europe, but more like the Western and the Nordic European countries. So this is also something to keep in mind. For the online, usually the projects are more calls for an online commission of a work with an international dimension, for instance, or it can be also, and I think it will be discussed after, some residency organization which also propose part of the work or part of the research to be done remotely or in a hybrid format. So remotely for the research, and when time is better, to come for the residency program. Another trend I just wanted to highlight as well, which is not a surprise, but at least it's good to say it, is that for the call, this online call, of course, we can feel as well that there is a bit less call, of course, for, like physical type of mobility, I would say, or on-site. But that there are also these calls when they are really based on online commission or festival proposing also some online format to propose to develop work or also to support the creative process. We notice as well that it can be more open to collective. So not only one artist when it's selected, but maybe a group of artists, because usually when it's a paid opportunity, and we only focus on paid opportunity, because we know as well that when you talk about online or hybrid format, there is not so much a business model behind it, very often, or not enough at least. So that's why what we, what we notice as well is the fact that this call, when they are online, can be also more open to collective form of action. So it's quite interesting in terms of creative process as well. More recently, what I can say, because this information is mostly related to the part from March to June on an international level as well. Now, what we notice, I mean, we update the website on an everyday, almost everyday basis with 2, 3, or 4 more calls. And, today the update it's really reflecting what is about opportunities today. You have the Bora Bora residency, which is a residency for dance professional, which work more like in a, as usual, and that eventually can be adapted. And there is another call, which is by the Reconnect Festival. And here, this is for a virtual residency. So we see as well this kind of call being specifically conceived within the scope, and also to answer a need for artists to still continue to create, and of course to make a living out of it, based also on this international dimension of their project. Last but not least, what we see more and more, beyond the fact that some calls are more like the regular type of call, but with this COVID adaptation in case the situation doesn't improve, or maybe more flexibility from the festival, from the residency organization, in order to delay some of the process without canceling it. What we see as well is, of course, more COVID-19 type of adaptable type of format. and also more project that also can be conceived in the public space as a way as well to, you know, like counterbalance the fact that sometimes when you are, I mean, or very often when you are in a closed venue, gallery or theater, for instance, of course, you need to follow a particular protocol, which make it even more challenging. Last but not least, what we see as well is more residency or mobility opportunities, which strengthens a particular topic or issue, which is also an interesting issue that, as it was mentioned in the introduction, to rethink mobility. I will just take an example. Again, it was put, I think, 1 or 2 days ago on the website of On the Move that I am passing here. There have been more calls since this caption of maybe 4 or 5 more since this caption was made. So you can, so this residency organization is from opportunities from the Meat Factory in Prague, in Czech Republic. For instance, they focus their call on the issue of sustainability, and they even advise as well that application should come, you know, like from artists, like I think it's 1,000 kilometers around Prague, for instance. So this is also interesting to see some shift in terms of, you know, topic and issue, for instance. So, which means I don't say that all these opportunities can tackle all the issues that artists are facing at the moment, but we can really see that organizations are also trying to adapt. It's the case also, as you mentioned, Jana, also the mobility info point, for instance, in terms of information that can be provided. Sometimes there are also more information that are needed in relation with intellectual property rights, for instance, as far as the web streaming is concerned. So we have more also question on that sense, and more also mobility funders are trying also to rethink in, I would say, in a short-term way, but also in a longer-term perspective. I would like to finish with 2 points, and I think, yeah, it's good for time, I think. Also to say there are opportunities which are shared, and we are also together with different partners, including some On the Move member, working with to update some mobility funding guide. I mean, if you see the former here, the news section is more related to one-off type of course or, you know, reminder and so on. And on the mobility funding section, you can find more what we call the mobility funding guides, where we try to update more regular funding for the support of artists and cultural professionals. So we are updating them for France, for the Netherlands. So I put the different partners also, which are helping us for that, for Hungary, Austria. We will be producing as well, with the support of the Institut Français, a new guide, I mean, which was planned before this COVID-19 situation, but which is really focusing on digital art, be it supported by festival organization or residency, for instance. You see also different updated guide for the Middle East region. For GALA, it's the acronym for Green Art Lab Alliance. So it will be also a guide supported by the update is supported by the Ministry of Culture in France and the Institut Français, again, to highlight funding scheme related to environmental sustainability and artistic practices. So this was a topic in last year event, but it's really a topic, as you know, which is getting even more attention in this current context. And another one on a focus on street art and circus in Latin America. So there are also information to come in, I think, like by the end of the year or maximum beginning of January. Last but not least, and this will be my conclusion, and in a way it's a nice way to connect to Alan. I wanted to finish with this definition that On the Move and the different contributed last year for the operational study, which was also done in the first pilot phase in 2019 for the i-Portunus, so mobility program that Alan will further develop later. And what was also, I would say, commissioned from us beyond doing this operational study was also to propose a new or updated definition of cultural mobility. And it was in April last year, so when this report was published. And I think, I mean, the first part of the definition, of course, is more, I would say, the technical part, and can also very much echo for those of you who know this really important study in 2008 called Mobility Matters, which really also further define the question of mobility and the impact on artists and cultural professionals. But the second part of the definition that we particularly phrased is even, I think in the current context, at least, is very much helping us as well at the level of On the Move, together with our member and partner, to rethink this question of mobility more as a conscious process, be it for the founder or for the one who practices, in relation with the different dimension it can embed, be it, of course, political, social, economic, environmental, ethical, and so on. So I think all these questions are very important also to rethink mobility format, and support, which were very unequally before this COVID situation distributed. And this situation is even more exacerbating right now. So in this rethinking process, we have also to take into consideration all these dimensions at various levels of competency, be it from funders, policymakers, and of course, first and foremost, the artists and cultural professionals. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Marie, for this great overview and very rich overview, although you didn't even have so much time. Thanks for sharing all this information. You pointed out so many important things, and I'm happy that we can come back to them later on in our discussion altogether. Thank you. I don't see any questions or comments directly now. So Marie made already the perfect connection, I said, to Alan. So I just hand over to you already now, Alan, to tell us a little bit about i-Portunus. Thank you and welcome again.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation and for the possibility to talk about i-Portunus and its future open calls. I think it's needless to say, but I always mention it, is that, of course, we are in extreme circumstances. And so therefore, I also don't have the really concrete open calls yet, because we are still discussing quite a bit. That's more into the details on how they will take form. But I can already mention some details, so then you know what's coming at you. Maybe I'll first start with the beginning of i-Portunus. So originally it was an open call by the European Commission, by Creative Europe program for tenders. So the first i-Portunus was initiated and was actually the Goethe Institute in collaboration with Institut Français Isoliatia and Nida Art Colony, who organized the first i-Portunus pilot project. So it's also really important to still mention that we are still in a pilot situation. So now also with the second version of i-Portunus, we are still in this experimental phase, I would say. And yeah, just also in the future, i-Portunus will continue, but also as part of the Creative Europe program. So there is a continuation in this way of support on a European level, which I think it's important to state, because I think one of the really important issues at the beginning for i-Portunus was that it was demand-driven, and that actually on a European level, it created the possibility for artists and cultural professionals to apply individually. And I think these two things are still very much the character of the whole mobility fund. Initially, so what I can go into a little bit, as Marie already stated. So originally, actually, the first part of the first i-Portunus was this operational study by On the Move, which was and still I would recommend it to everyone to go through it who is interested in mobility, because it gave really an overview of what was there, but also, and sometimes more importantly, also what was not there. And definitely the first i-Portunus, also now the second one, is partly based on these findings. So I think it's also nice to have a look at that. What else? The first i-Portunus, in the end, I think it was also a bit a way to figure out how important this mobility actually was. Because to give you a little bit of an idea, there were over 3,000 people who applied for the first i-Portunus and applied for a budget of total amount of 6 million euros. which of course is a really tremendous number, I would say, if you take it into account that these are all individuals, and that's actually the maximum grants were also not that high, because in the end, Iportanus supports parts of projects, so not the entire project, but actually the really focuses on the artistic mobility. So it really proved, I would say, the first Iportanus really proved that the sense for mobility was extremely high. It proved many things, as you, maybe it's also another thing that we can share is the policy recommendations of the first Iportanus, where you will find in detail all the findings, also in relation to established artists, emerging artists, etc. And the numbers that we collected from that first Iportanus. This is also what you see now is the old website. We're working on a new version for the second Iportanus. It will look very similar, but still it includes also the information about more like the historic part. I say historic while it was only 2019, so it's still pretty recent, I would say. What else to say about the first Iportanus? Another thing to tell is that the way it functioned was that there were 3 open calls, and 3 open calls in the same sectors over the 3 calls, and those sectors were visual arts and performing arts. And there you can also see that objectives were also identified, which were going into international collaborations, production-oriented residencies, and professional development. These are objectives that we also continue to use now. Now I will go a little bit into how we envisioned Iportanus, the version that we're currently working on now. Because important to say is that with the first Iportanus, we had these 3 open calls. They were each time focusing on the same sector, which allowed also to have a little bit of flexibility in terms also of the amount of applications, etc. With the second Iportanus, we decided to delve a little bit deeper, to go a little bit deeper in the various sectors. And so the sectors that we will focus on, it's through 4 open calls. Initially, there were supposed to be 5, but that's put down to 4. And these 4 open calls will focus on music, literary translation, architecture, and cultural heritage. So the choice for these sectors is partly also provided by the operational study, but also by conversations and analysis we had with intermediaries of the various sectors. And in that time, when the application was made, which is also pre-COVID-19, of course, it was really focusing on, okay, where are the precarious situations in all of these sectors? Like, for example, with literary translation, it was really important that it was identified literary translation, not literature in a whole, because this was the feedback that was also coming up in the research, that specifically in terms of literary translation, that the precariousness was high, and that also in terms of international individual mobility programs, that there were not much supporting possibilities. I just want to stress that here we're really talking about individual mobility. So we're not talking about applications that you can do as organizations as such. So I think it's always really important to note, because of course there are, and Marie will also know that way better than I do, actually, that there are a lot of possibilities, of course, also on a European level for organizations. But here we're talking about individuals, which is definitely also, it really creates also different perspectives, I would say. So this is how we started. Now, to be a little bit more concrete, ideally, we're still aiming at launching the first 2 open calls on the 7th of December. The first 2 open calls that we would launch would be music and literary translation. And these open calls will be open until the end of February. So every open call would be open for 2 months. The application procedure, it's similar to what you see on the website. So here on the right, in the right corner above in blue, you see a link to the My Iportanus, which is a different website where you will find the application form that you can fill in digitally. You have to create an account, and then you go to the initial application form, and you can fill that in. I think also another important element in the character of the Iportanus Mobility Fund is also that it was really worked at to create an application form that was straightforward and actually and did not provide too much of an administrative turnaround to fill it in. Also, again, seen from to really keep it as broad as possible in terms of people applying for it. And this is also one part that we keep, of course, in the new i-Portunus. So also, again, there with great care, we had to make some adjustments in the application form, but also there we will still try to keep that as simple as possible. What else to say? So the first two ones would be music and literary translation. After that, on the 15th of January, we would launch the open call for architecture, which would also run for 2 months. And then on the 15th of February, we would launch the 2 final open calls, which would again be music and cultural heritage. So that's the schedule that we have for the moment. And I really hope that we can stick to that. There are some things, so I can go into a little bit of detail about the specific open calls, maybe the one of music and the one of literary translation. As said, not everything is decided yet, but the support that we provide exists out of 2 parts. There will be one part that will be a kind of, fixed fee of about 250 euros, which would be for transport. And then we would have a system of per diems, so based on the destination where to travel to and also based on the duration. And the grants would have a maximum of 3,000 euros. So those are actually a little bit also in terms of finances and in terms of budget, what the possibilities will be. In that sense, it's also a bit different than the first i-Portunus, and that also came out of the policy recommendations, that actually this it allows us to make a little bit changes and make the per diems a little bit more realistic, depending on which part of Europe you're actually traveling to, because of course there are some changes. Some places are more expensive than other places, so that's a way how we dealt with that. I think that's already saying idea. What also in terms of the selection process, what is important to say is that every application is also evaluated by 2 evaluators. So it's also important that it's not only one voice or it's not an administration. There's really a group of evaluators that are specialized in the specific sectors who will go over the applications. That said, what is important to mention is that it's really the mobility that counts. Within the mobility, the questions that we would evaluate is more into its necessity, realistic sense of the mobility, the outcome, things like that. And then, of course, this was in the most ideal situation when there would be no COVID-19 pandemic, and we have had tremendous discussions about how we would change it or what to do. I mean, I think there's also a lot of conversations around about, I think everybody that's dealing with mobility at a certain point had this question like, do we continue this or do we sit this out? In our consortium, and I forgot to mention that now for the second i-Portunus, the consortium is Goethe Institute again, Institut Français and Isoliatia. So those are the 3 partners that we now do this i-Portunus with. And that there was pretty quickly this sense of like, okay, we have to continue with this because it is a sense of support. And for a lot of artists, a lot of cultural professionals, this is definitely a way to continue. That said, we also included a clause in the open call. This clause, we're still working a little bit on that. I think mainly what I could say about that is that it includes a bigger amount of flexibility. So we are looking at, for example, one of the things that we changed is that there is a flexibility to do the mobility for longer periods. So you have the possibility you don't have to do the mobility immediately after the notification of the results and the signing of the necessary papers, but you can also wait with it if the circumstances are not right and do that at a later stage. We're also looking into the possibility that you could change destination. I think that's a very important thing to say also there, because in these circumstances where we are in now, definitely in larger countries, there might be a big difference between which city and or which region. On the other hand, also in terms of if you could change into a different country, a sense of mobility could still go on. That said, of course, we also realize that in some cases it will be very hard to change these plans or to change these destinations. Therefore, we're also now discussing to open up and to be more flexible also towards other ways of filling in the grant than actual mobility. So we are also discussing possibilities of blended mobility and virtual mobility. And I think this might be very important for the discussion as well, is okay, how do you deal with that in terms of course, reporting, and in terms of, how would you concretely show that you are actually doing that? And then there, the focus will lie a little bit more, which I find actually an interesting shift on the process. And also documenting that process. So I think there we could go into more experimental ways even of documenting artistic projects or artistic mobility, and I would be very interested in that. And then on the other hand, we also still focus even more on the international collaboration. So it's really about, okay, thinking about what does this mobility actually does for somebody's practice. What is the qualitative element, and an openness towards how can you actually develop these in different ways. So that's more going into the whole COVID-19 situation. And needless to say, of course, we just have to be very flexible and see how things go, because also for us, we have to really figure out, nobody can tell how things will turn out. I mean, we also get signs from both positions. On the one hand, positions people saying basically like we don't do any travel at all. Then on the other hand, also positions of people who are also depending economically on this international mobility, and who are very eager to continue. So also there, I think that might be interesting for the discussion. So I think that's a bit of an introduction. Of course, if there are any questions or things, I'm happy to answer these.
Great, Alan, thank you so much. I think it's very encouraging, as what Marie already showed with a few funding schemes, that funding schemes do think about more flexibility and more openness during this time, which is really necessary. And at the same time, it's really encouraging that there are actually funding programs that offer international mobility opportunities, even during these times where mobility doesn't seem possible or very, very limited. And what you just touched in the end, some don't even want to travel, some really want to travel. I think this is great that we have Danilo and Rafaële with us to share their experience, so we can hear also from first source how they deal with these difficult times. There's one question I see here in the chat, a very concrete one: why there are no open calls for visual artists planned?
In the case of Iportanus, it's actually because we're still in the second pilot program, I think, but I don't want to speak for the Creative Europe program, of course, but I think in the future this might be different. But for the moment, because we are a second pilot program, we're still focusing on experimenting, and therefore the decision was made to focus on the various sectors that are also active within the are supported within the Creative Europe program. So that's why.
Great. So I guess because the question also came for the performing arts, I guess this is the same answer. And great, thank you. The first deadline will be in February. Right?
The first deadline would be the 7th of December, hopefully. That would be for music and literary translation. The second
this is the deadline already.
Yeah. No, not the deadline.
Yeah.
Sorry, the launch.
The launch,
the end of February. Sorry.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I guess you will update the info as soon as possible on the website. And my colleague posted the website already in the chat, so people can be updated. Great. Before we go on to more questions, I would now like to switch to Danilo and Rafaële, and then we go into the discussion with everybody, and then we'll pick up questions, also more questions from the audience. But so we get an insight of Rafaële and Danilo's experiences and how they deal at the moment with mobility before we move on. So Danilo, thanks for being here. You're a visual artist having lots and lots of experiences with short-term and long-term exchanges with artist in residence programs and other mobility opportunities. It's great that you shared a little bit about your experience or what mobility actually means to you, and what has changed for you in these times where mobility is so restricted. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for the introduction, and thanks Motovila for inviting me to have an opportunity to discuss this topic with such an important guests. I'll briefly introduce myself. So I'm Danilo Milovanović, an artist based in Ljubljana in Slovenia. I hold a master's degree from Academy of Fine Arts and Design in Ljubljana. In the meantime, I also studied in Prague in Umprum Academy as an exchange student. And in the last couple of years, I spent my time in mostly in Poland and Czech Republic and Slovenia, but kind of developed my creativity based on transition of moving, not just being in one place, which really influenced my artist expression. And maybe just to come closer, I'm interested in social topics and in, let's say, production of urban space, or like in general in public spaces. And that's also why it's quite important to be in touch with the dynamics that are happening around, not just in a local context, because working with a space and with the people, it's much easier and more direct if you are at the spot in the field. So I should say that, like, in the last couple of years, I also started to think in more open form way, which means, so you have an idea, and the whole process of creative stays open and depends on if it's working in community, depends on the process of community. If it's public space, also, and some unexpected dynamics and situation can happen in space. So generally speaking, this kind of dynamic approach to creative works together with mobility, with traveling as well. I will leave the conversation for a debate about my position in the current situation in Corona. But for now, I can say that I have an experience of this so-called remote residency. So we can share thoughts a bit later. Now I would give over to Rafaële. Thank you.
Thanks, Danilo, for the short introduction. We're looking forward to, now you triggered us a little bit about your remote residency, but yeah, we get to that later on. Thanks a lot. It's going to be interesting to hear more about that and your experiences on that.
Thank you.
Rafaële, you're a co-founder and co-director of CocoonDance together with Reinhard Endras, and you work a lot with artists that are not based in Germany, that come to rehearsals and for shows to Germany, and you travel extensively with your company, and you have performances all over the world, at least in normal times. So can you explain a little bit what mobility means to you, and how it is affecting your work at the moment?
Yeah, so thank you, Jana, and thank you everybody for this invitation. So I kind of, I will start just introduce myself a little bit. I'm a choreographer. I was a long-time performer, trained in ballet actually, and worked in very big companies as a dancer, and since 2000 we have our own company. And so I have many, I will make it short because, so we have many tasks. So apart from the company, which is the main course of my life, we have also 2 juniors companies. So we work with non-professionals, one in Switzerland and one in Germany. We also have a venue where we program 2 different festivals, and we offer residency. So we are very busy with internationality. And as our company is binational, we have to travel from Switzerland to Germany constantly in order to manage those two nationality of the company. So you also already mentioned, Jana, that we work with dancers that are not based in Germany. So alone for that, mobility for us means work. I mean, without mobility, we cannot really work. I mean, at least before the pandemic, we thought it would be like that. So impossible to work, impossible to get the dancers to come to Germany to be together in one space to work. And also for us, mobility means meetings, encounters. Nothing can replace a residency in Africa. I mean, I cannot do it online because I will never have the same experience. I mean, for us, it's a physical experience that reflects in the work that we need to in order to be creative, or at least creative like we like to be. Also, the touring. I mean, in last year we had 50 performances outside of Germany. So all those meetings with different audiences, discussions, also reflect in the work. And on top of it, this togetherness of the group when we travel, or we go 3 weeks in Mali, for example, also changes completely the exchange in between us, and how can we it can also show in the work. So all those things we got cut. We can say we got cut completely in the middle of a flow. Now I'm back, my first travel. After 8 months, we are back to where we were shut out in March, because we were kicked out of Zagreb just before a premiere 8 months ago. And now we are back here because we are very... We are very strong in our thoughts, and we are going to try to do our premiere on Friday. Hopefully nothing goes in the middle of it. So it was the first trip since 8 months. And how to deal with this new situation. At first it was a little bit of kind of a shock, or no, not a shock, just wait until it goes better, because you never expect that it would be a long story. And observing all those online things that were exploding in the net, that got really tiring to watch. And but also reflects a bit the mind of an artist, because we are very flexible and we are survival, I found, and we constantly are used to recreate ourselves or find strategies to improvise with the situation. And the COVID, I found it's again a good example of how our artists react against, or with the COVID. And for ourselves, it goes ups and downs, I would say, because the first time was, what can we do? Of course, it was even worse because we could not even be together in one studio. So how can we keep this togetherness of this group? Because the company is super strong. It's a very strong teamwork. How can we keep this together, sustain this teamwork, but also sustain them financially, that they can survive, because they need to survive. So we found projects, and we worked online, and we could manage quite a lot of things. And we realized also that some of those way of working could be continued after the pandemic, because, for example, we did a research, movement research online. And we realized like post and pre-production, and we realized that it was a very good way to connect in between the production phases, in order to not always export the dancers and take them out of their, private life, to be also to have a normal life in between, like kind of a more human-like way. And also we realized that when we're fully in production time, we have not so much time to discuss or to reflect. So this was something that was interesting to do. And in fact, we did many things in the pandemic. We took the philosophy of everything which is allowed, we're gonna do. So now, for example, we were allowed to go to Zagreb. We do it. I even thought of making a project which is about finding countries where the theaters are open and go there to perform, and just find strategies to continue to work. I would like to, when it's finished with this pandemic, or I don't know if it's going to finish, but after, I think it would be very important to find another way of communication. Communication, Augenhöhe, also eye level, in between all the different players, because I think we are all in this kind of unstable situation at the moment. And a meeting like this today, I found it super important how to connect in a different way, and how to find a way to be mobile and to restart the work after, but with all the knowledge of this experience that we have made. And I would be very sad if the consequence is to say we're only going to work with local artists or just show local artists, because I found the exchange extremely crucial. But I think there are some ways to do it much better. And it's a lot to do with the communication and to the exchange in between all the players and programmers, founders. And in Germany, I thought there was a very good input with the foundings programs, that to use this time to create different public development, digital formats, many residency research, and to use this time in a creative way. And I hope that all this time that we spend and all the ideas that we collected, that we can use them for the future after, and to make it maybe better. So I think that's enough for now.
Great, Rafaële, you touched so many different topics already. So let's try to...
Sorry.
No, it's great. Thank you. Thank you for raising so many issues. We'll just tackle all of them hopefully now in our joint discussion. What I found in both of your statements quite encouraging, actually. Danilo, you only tipped it, but we will hear more, that you do virtual residencies. Rafaële, now you start to travel again where it's possible. So there are things happening, or the other virtual digital projects that are happening. So this is quite encouraging that there are things happening, as it is encouraging that there are funding schemes still on the market, let's say, where you can apply to. So the urgent question is actually what I think comes out very clearly is, how can we bridge this time now until mobility will be possible again, without these huge restrictions and limitations, without losing any opportunities for the future, without losing our international connections. Otherwise, the other question would be maybe a bit provocative. Why can't we just wait and focus on our work on a regional or national level and until we can travel again? So let's just go into a sort of hibernation, a winter sleep, and pick up our international encounters when it's possible again. So that would be the other option, right? I mean, it's not an option, it's very provocatively put, but maybe Danilo and Rafaële, as an artist, you touched it already, but why can't we just wait until we can travel again?
Should I continue?
Yeah.
So like I don't 100% agree that we have to travel immediately. I found this, at least at the beginning, Corona times, like probably all of us felt this kind of world fell out of some routine and some rapid tempo, and like many of us even enjoyed that. But like of course during the time it's impossible just to leave things waiting. And I would say that as Rafaële said, like all the artists are I mean, most of the artists are flexible and trying to adapt in the current situation, which is in some parts definitely good for our practices, in a way that we are kind of going through some personal training, so like putting us in different situation. But like definitely I'm not sure that it would work in a long range. Like for 1 or 2 years, for different approaches, it's fine. At least I'm talking about mostly visual arts. In dance, it's probably different, or in music. But it's not impossible, definitely. I would maybe mention like there is a band from Serbia, for instance, called Goethe, that had online practicing even 10 years ago. So they had this as a practice because they lived in different towns. But of course, they met and had a gig live. So it wasn't the case like now when we have even these online concerts. That I'm not sure that work in this way how they're imagined, because it's just, I mean, like it's still not common technology we have at home, like a VR technology that we can feel the space, but it's mostly like it's hard to transfer this feeling of live music. But definitely what I found positive in this is like that we all know this form of Instagram taking over, for example, when the artists presented their work in some virtual space. And I found interesting that many institutions, of course, adapted to this model, and not only this Instagram, but like they adjusted all the social networks and virtual platforms for presenting the artists, not only promoting the events, but actually to use it as a kind of exhibiting space, which reaches much wider audience than it would be a case of if it's like normal process of presenting work in gallery spaces. So what I found as an advantage in this time is to experience different ways of thinking, and definitely to re-ask ourselves and our practices. But as I said, I'm not sure that it would work for a long term. So as a bridge is possible, but like as a long term, maybe you can add something, Rafaële, from your perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree that the length of it is very tiring. The first shutdown was nearly fun. But then to restart was difficult, because the physical work, you can just do as much in your living room, but it's very limited. And then when we restart, we were very tired. It was very tiring to restart, and also we need to be fit. And I realized this time that if we're gonna shut down again, because we just reopened and now we cannot perform anymore in Germany. So I thought, if I'm gonna close it now again, I don't know if I can restart. So we decided to use the venue and to perform for ourselves, because to make the piece grow, we're going to have live streams, but not in the sense of pretending to show the piece the way it is, but to give it as a try for a new genre of watching performances, and using let the VJs play with it and give it to them, and it doesn't matter what they're gonna show. It's also an audience also chooses what he wants to watch. So to give it to not stop the flow again, because I think it would be very, very difficult for us to restart. And what I like about those live streams is maybe the possibility to find new audience, to reach new audience that maybe doesn't come to the theater. It's on donation, so they don't need to pay if they don't want. It has also some good aspect about it. Even so, I get fast bored watching, especially live art on a screen. It's nothing to compare. But what I think what is important is to continue the thinking and to continue to create. We cannot stop our heads, you know. And so this is the good thing about it. We still can create just sitting, and this is what we try to do, so that we don't fall asleep, like you say, like going in hibernation and wait until it gets better. Because I mean, for me, everybody's different, but for me, it's not an alternative. I need to work, and it's not only an economical thing. It's I need to work to feel good. And I need to be creative, and there are many ways to be creative. So this is what we are finding out, and I feel that in some ways there were a very good input also from the group, because then the whole group is very aware and very taking care of the company, so responsible for the whole group. But it made it even more, because we know that we have to work with restrictions, and I think that was super strong. And I feel the only thing what's very positive about it is just this rethinking. Creative work, rethinking producing, rethinking programming, and see together maybe what could be different after. So I think this would be to find out vision for something different. But I know that to continue this too long would be difficult. Then we would have to revisit the strategies and find another way of continuing. But I found it's a bit learning by doing, because it's constantly new. It's nothing you can grab and say, oh, this I did last time. No, you always have to work it out on the day. Which can be interesting sometimes. Yeah.
The tricky thing is, I guess, we don't really know until we can travel normally again, right? So I think it's really important to tackle these questions of what is needed in these times that might be there for quite a while and longer than we wish them to be. So what do you think, or what would you need as support structures, be it financial or in other ways? There was a question also in the chat just being raised after your comment, Danilo, about the social media, and Rafaële, you touched as well that all the things are not being paid, which you see online now and in social media. So you can't, I mean, it's great to see art for free, and it's great to reach more audiences like this also, who maybe can't afford or would never go to the theaters or into a gallery. So you reach more audiences. But the fact that it is not being paid usually is, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I'm actually currently in that situation. The project that me and 3 colleagues did the last year finished with the exhibition and the movie. So the exhibition was supposed to be opened in 2 weeks, but regarding the restrictions, it's going to be, I'm not sure, can't tell anything at the moment, but like we decided to show the movie online. So of course, like it's going to be free streaming. Even if it would be live, probably it would be free streaming, but like a premiere for certain with certain seats, like. But in this way, like, it's even hard, to keep some. Many festivals, for example, they expect a movie not to be shown in a global audience, for example. So many of them want to show film first, or like, so we are actually facing this kind of compromises between like showing your work and keeping kind of being professional, but like also I would just like touch the topic of organizing residencies that I had a conversation recently. For instance, as I mentioned before, I had this remote residency that was run by Begehung, an organization based in Chemnitz. So they invited me actually when Corona already started, and they already thought about possibilities. So here you can see the result, but I will come to that soon. So they invited me to work with the city, with the space, but from the position of remote residency. So I stayed in Ljubljana and was expected to work something with city of Chemnitz. So I tried in like this Google Maps, Google Earth, but it just didn't work. And it was also hard to come in touch with some community. So this work is actually, as you can see, I just asked them to connect me with local photographers and ask them to send me as much as possible photos of their town. So I did actually urban exploration in Ljubljana, and I was looking for same or super similar motifs. So in the end, I was satisfied with the work and like found it okay. Probably I wouldn't do this without following conditions, but like I also heard some residencies, especially from Eastern countries, that are usually attractive to artists, I would say. For example, Beirut, Lebanon, or some of these countries. So they're usually taking artists and giving their conditions. But in this case of Corona, of remote residency, they face the situation when if they want to support artists in a way that they pay rents, food, like a pocket money, that would be much more expensive for them to finance the artist based in London, for example. And also artist is not present in Lebanon, so they're facing this kind of basic problems of running successful residency and sustainable at the same time. So maybe this can be also the question of like sustainability of remote residencies.
I mean, you were asking what artists would need maybe to I think, I mean, I am quite privileged because we have a space where we can work and we have kind of an institutional funding. But I feel that it would be great that there is money for research, so that we can use this time to reflect and to research, and that venues that are closed anyways, that they open their doors for residencies to work with 10 people in one space, so that there should be open calls from the venues that have nothing to do anyway. So they should open it for artists, any kind of artists to work, and then after maybe open a discussion. Try to open a discussion in between. Like we can make like groups of artists and they can reflect with each other even online, in order to have an exchange of some kinds. I think that would be useful and very creative, because we're constantly running out of time and we have no time to research and we have no time for this. Now we have time, but we don't have possibilities. So maybe that would, and I don't think it's so difficult. Yeah, I mean, that would be my proposal.
That's a good point. Thank you, Rafaële, and thanks, Danilo, for pointing out or sharing with us the virtual residency. Marie, maybe you can, from your observation, like adding to what Danilo said, because you mentioned it also in your presentations, do you have any other concrete examples how these residencies work or can work, or do you have any other statements from organizations that you know of how these residencies are being organized now, or
Thank you for this very huge question. I hope it's okay, because there is like some noise outside, so I hope you can hear me. So maybe I will have two comments at least on this question of residency. I think it's quite interesting as well to, and I will share it in the chat, to look at the survey that is being conducted by, so I am sharing it in the chat, by Res Artis. I guess many of you are familiar, if you are into a residency, to the Res Artis website and organization. So this is this international network for residency organization, and they share also a lot of calls in Europe, internationally, in different disciplines as well. And they have been developing a partnership with the University of London to conduct an impact study on the impact of the COVID, not only on the residency organization, but also on the artists as well, for whom, also to be part of a residency, again, I would say is part of their professional development, but very often as well as out of an economic necessity as well. What is interesting, so there will be 3 surveys, and what is interesting is that, so this one is the first, the result of the first one are out, and on this question of virtual or remote residency, which are also a way to still continue to develop projects, also for the artists to get a living as well. When it's paid residency, because it's also the case, but it's not always the case. What is interesting is that a majority of residency organizations, at least the one which answer the survey, they mention that they are very keen, or that they have already developed some kind of remote type of format, or more like online format, to keep, this connection going on, to develop projects also at an international level. And a larger majority of artists who replied the survey were very keen not to go too much in that kind of format, and they would prefer as Rafaële was saying, and I guess Danilo as well, what you prefer, of course, is to be really in the other context, in the other country, really to experience, to feel it. So it's quite interesting to see as well this discrepancy. So let's see also in the next months, because unfortunately this crisis, is a bit, I don't know how to find the right word, but will kind of remain, at least for a couple of months, the form of impact. But all this also complexity are interesting to take into consideration, because it's true that as I think it's Rafaële who was saying, like, we are learning while doing, and every day we are knitting something, and sometimes we are redoing the knitting the day after, and so on, and we are just working on maybe element of strategy, but not as a strategy as such. And maybe as well in that sense, be it at the level of network, be it at the level of organization, artists, it's also the question of how to adapt, and also how to learn from the experience. I think there would be nothing worse than to comment on this period and not to take very much learning out of it. And a second point I wanted to mention, what do artists need? So it's, for me, always extremely interesting. We take part in many also training, also to get the feedback from artists from different contexts, in order also to build our argumentation at a more advocacy level, be it at national, European or international level. And I will share also in the chat. It was one of the, if not the most popular article we share on the Move website. I don't know why it disappeared, but I will share it. And it's from a curator, Carmen, and she's both, I think, from Mexico and the UK. And she say in her article, instead of providing us, let's say, at least funding, because as you all say, online type of format are not, most of the time are not paid. But if there is that kind of funding, why don't you have also like funding for artists and cultural professional, independent kind of change maker? Why not you don't pay them to try together to build also the system of tomorrow, to think of cultural policy of tomorrow, to think of funding scheme of tomorrow? And I think it's in terms of research and development as well, it's interesting because more than ever, we learn this question of adaptability and flexibility that could be also embedded in the future of, let's say, funding scheme for mobility, and the fact to involve as well artists and cultural professionals from different contexts would be also a real added value to further develop, this so-called new system, or the system of the new normal, as some people say. Yeah, and I will share the article, which is very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. It's all the more important for also the question that we still want to tackle also today about, like, anyway, we have to rethink mobility, right? We can't go on as we did before concerning all the negative factors of mobility. So this also leads to this, I guess, that we need people who really rethink mobility now. We can't just move on even after we can travel again. We can't go back to the old normal anyway. It becomes very clear now.
Just one thing. I mean, we can rethink the mobility as artists, but we shouldn't do it alone, because there is so many other people that are traveling. I mean, how can we change that one? It's like,
of course, there's always the question of responsibility, and obviously artists are not responsible to change the negative effects and the mobility, but we can be part of this process, I think. And as artists are often how do you say, like the ones who go first and be really creative. It is also in this case, there's so many thoughts and thinking in different artistic sector going on towards rethinking mobility. So I think, we should just be part of the process, but obviously we can't be responsible, or artists can't be responsible for the whole process. Thanks, Rafaële. Yes, Alan. You can just unmute yourself, I guess, because we're a small group of people here, so just feel free to.
Just a couple of points to tie into what has been said till now. I find these proposals very interesting. I mean, I think this is really to hear it, and I agree with Marie, to hear from artists that, for example, this idea of the venues, and to sort of open that up for people to focus more on reflection and research, and to actually really practice. I think that's a very interesting one. Also, the example of Danilo about really engaging with artists, although you cannot travel yourself, engaging with artists in another city and creating a different viewpoint. I think that's also something very inspirational, I would say. So I think these two examples are already actually ways of dealing with artistic mobility differently. And also, they still focus on some of the objectives, or some of the things why mobility is so interesting, which is being these exchanges and also creating the possibilities to actually work. And I think really to go into this topic of work, of course, I guess there is a little bit of tension in terms of budgets, because what we see, for example, locally in Belgium, you see that with the support structure for culture in the COVID pandemic, what happens is that I think on the one hand, we should really keep on focusing on what the sector needs. The sector also needs production. I mean, the sector needs budgets for production to actually make something. even though right now that might not always be possible, but we have to be very careful in terms of for policymakers and politicians, etc. We have to be very careful that we do not turn these budgets into digital experiments, or to go to the other extreme, I would say. So I think we really have to mention that, because I see that sometimes happening. For example, there was a support fund for the COVID-19 situation in Flanders by the Flemish government, in which they said, like, okay, we will support events, which was sort of in between the two lockdowns. So it was a short moment of, okay, some things are open, so we can support events. It was rather clever, because they said, like, okay, we can support events where 2 contracts are signed by participants, artists, and that these artists are also properly financed. So I think that was good. The only problem is that reality kicks in. There is a second lockdown. The events are closed. So what happens now is, instead of that budget still going into production or whatsoever, or some sense of general support, because everybody is in a tight situation, what happens is they actually change the essence of the fund, and they say, like, now, no, it's digital events. And there I find it's very difficult, because there I say, like, okay, if you do that, then you actually start to take budgets away from what is already needed, and turn it into something else. So I would say, like, okay, if you're talking about budget, we have to make sure that the budget is still there, and in the ideal situation, that there are additional funds for these experimentings, etc. And I think, and I have been in a lot of conversations lately, I think it's also not either or. So I think many people agree on the fact that the digital reality is not ideal. I mean, even people who have been working at pre-COVID times, so everything has its advantages and disadvantages. So I think also we really have to focus on these hybrid formats, which is a combination of both. And there I just want to tie into also the Iportanus program. I really find it very important that we keep on mentioning that the artistic mobility, as we know it, that it is essentially part of an artistic job, let's put it that way. So if you, for example, in Belgium, there is a list for various jobs where people can still do essential travels. For example, artists and cultural professionals are in that list. So officially, you could still say, like, as an artist, if you have an invitation or whatsoever, or there is a necessity to travel, you can still do so. And I think it's important to argument that. Of course, we don't want that too much to happen, but I think this acknowledgement of the essential part of this artistic mobility is also very important, because it is not black and white. I mean, there will be situations that you still need to travel. My idea for the future, or like if I look at, of course, I'm very curious what will happen also with, for example, the i-Portunus fund and how people will react on it. I would say is that people, I think is a good side effect somehow, is there's definitely now a consciousness about international travel, which I think also relates to climate topics, etc. This consciousness is now here. I don't think it will be here for a long time. So, I mean, the moment that COVID is under control, I think this will change very quickly into another situation. So also there, I think it's also important to really think about how can we do things differently, but also and that's again also sustainability, to see, like, okay, how can we make these ideas and these things that we have now, how can we continue those once COVID is finished, because that will be a completely different ballgame. And I think many people will just go back to what it was.
But maybe then it would be good to use the time to find strategies after now that we are in the crisis. And because I agree, I'm afraid when it goes back that it will be forgotten in 1 second. But if we use the time to find strategies that are also with positive aspect of it, then maybe we have a chance to change something.
I think I agree. I think, but I think it's also, I think a lot of things are already happening. So I would say that, but I think that more goes about a framework of agreements. Let's put it that way. I think, for example, this sense of flexibility towards how a mobility can be filled in, I think it's a really important one. And I think it's a matter of, really making that present, and it's the same. Like, for example, with telework, I would say, on a normal work floor, there is a completely different discussion going on. Everybody of us is working at home, but if you look at the normal agreement within a working contract, then maybe you have 1 day per week that you can be at home or so. While at this point, maybe no one is only 1 day at home at this point. And so I think there the negotiation would be like, okay, this is something that we now have to rediscuss. And I guess this idea of flexibility towards what a mobility is, and sort of this broadening up of the definition, and also including other forms, remote residencies, for example, or blended mobility or things like that. I think, this is something that we should try to write in, or to make sure that these things, for example, will continue.
Great, thank you both of you for touching this topic again. Also, like that we should think about, also not only rethinking but reorganizing actually mobility, right? That it doesn't stay in the discussion, but that funding schemes, other support structures will change also, so we have so we can actually adapt also in this way, and so that we're not going back to the old normal. I would like to pick up a question from the audience. Maybe this goes to Danilo. Danilo, by the way, it would be great if you could post in the chat if there's a link for the Chemnitz project. If you have any resource, anything, that would be great if you could put it in the chat, because the audience is interested in that. And then there's a question that I found is interesting about the artist in residence programs, because we've talked about the connection between the host and the artists now, and what's possible here. But what happens actually with the community that the residency was actually happening at? So usually when you go, or in the best optional way, it is like this: that you go make a residency at one location, and the community also benefits from the artists coming to the community, and maybe there's an exchange with the community, with the theater or the gallery, or maybe you do even art in public spaces. So this can't happen now at the moment. Or do you actually have experiences with including the community of the location even from remote? Is that possible at all, or how can we find ways to do that? Any ideas, any observations? Or Danilo, did you have any experiences with this when you were doing the residency in Chemnitz? You're unmuted.
Unmute, yeah. May I just quickly repeat the question, because I was just
sorry.
answering at the moment in the chat.
Yeah, no, the question was about how is it actually possible at all to include the community where you were actually having the residency when you're doing the residency remote or digitally?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, it's quite hard, I would say, because let's say in this normal residency you have basic elements as an host, artist, and locality, or let's say context. And in this remote residency, you lose this intimacy, spending time together. So you can like have a conversation, but it's timely and space limited. So you just communicate, not experiencing anything, not like having, I don't know, walk, drink, dinner together. And also from perspective of culture, so you can't communicate with, I don't know, hundreds of people online. If you are at the spot, it's just happening spontaneously. So you can read about some culture, you can watch documentaries, but when you're in the field, I would say, then you get it on the different level, and you are able to work with the community or with the cultural issues in a certain context more clearly and more directly. So I would say because of course there are many different approaches in contemporary art, but definitely this dealing with a physical space and with the communities is maybe the hardest in this online way. It's okay to discuss, to make research in this way, but on direct actions, I would say that it's quite important to be at the spot. So that's my opinion about this.
Thank you. Rafaële, did you have any experiences with connecting to audiences that are far away, actually? Or the community of a different place?
No, not really. I mean, we what we did in the pandemic, we organized meetings per Zoom with both junior companies, and then we put them together in one meeting, the German ones and the Swiss ones. So this is what we did. Now we're gonna it was interesting because actually we would have we wouldn't have put them together if this was not so virtual. So that was really exciting. They were super excited about it. And now in December we're gonna try to have encounters with 3 festivals in Brazil on the 5th of December. So we have a live stream, and then we have the physical memory with one of our dancers. She's gonna do it in Bonn, and the people in Brazil and also wherever they are can follow. And we do hope that we can have a meeting also online with audience from different places. So after that, I would be able to tell you a bit more, but I didn't experience this yet, unfortunately.
Thank you. There's a question that goes a little bit in a different direction, but I would like to say it out loud here. Maybe you have some ideas on that. If you're quite new in the business, let's say, and you try to make your international connections, how is it possible these days at all? Like if you're an emerging artist who was just about to make international connections right before the pandemic, and then now you're cut off, how can you actually start now when you didn't have experiences before?
I mean, this is a very good question, because this is also, I think, one of a very strong my concern. It's very hard. I feel that this pandemic, in a lot of cases, is really making this gap bigger in between the more established one and the newer one. And if I imagine young dance students coming out in the work world and they cannot audition. And I feel there is a lot of creativity and talent that can vanish before it even started to bloom. So this would be a very important question to find out what can we do to make all this potential die. So because I found it's super difficult when you don't have anything. When you're just starting, it's very difficult in this moment. And if it's so long, I don't know, I find it super difficult. And that would be, again, a possibility to have bigger companies or venues to open spaces for them. I think because this is very important that they don't, I mean, in dance, that they don't lose physical praxis. And if they are driven, they can work also alone, but they need a space and they need some kind of a little support. Yeah.
And how is it with the Iportanus program? Can people apply for actually looking for the international collaborations or collaborators, or do they have to have specific partners already that they want to make a project or a residency with?
Both is possible. So you can. Again, it stays really a broad mobility front. Actually, and both is possible. Of course. there needs to be somehow an indication of what will you do, and is it and who do you include? Or so of course it's always better if you do an application that there might be an invitation letter or things like that, or anything specific about the host organization, but it's not obligatory. And in the end, what we also see, and that's going back to the first iPortunus as well, is what is the host organization? The host can also be a person. It can be even a situation, a festival or whatsoever. So in that sense, there are no really eligible criteria like you have to do this or you have to do that. But you have to just keep in mind that the evaluator has to, in a way, be able to evaluate somehow that there is a feasibility to the plans you have. And then, of course, a host organization or an invitation letter whatsoever is not bad to include.
Okay, great. Yeah, Marie.
On this, I wanted to add as well. Indeed, this is a key challenge. I mean, this question of international networking, particularly for artists, cultural professionals, whatever their discipline is when they start their career, but even beyond, I would say. Because let's try to see also like some positive, aspects of this and learning of this context once again. One interesting point is that as far as, particularly, I mean, if we are still also in this connection with Europe, as far as the cultural network are concerned, in many extent, they have never been so open. I mean, if we take also like, let's say some example in the performing arts sector, like the IETM, which is the International Network for Performing Arts. I mean, many of their sessions recently have not only been open to their member, but also like to professionals in the performing arts sector. So some of this meeting, which should have been held, one of the latest one was supposed to be held in Belgrade, so not all of us can go, have the capacity to pay for the membership fee and for the participation. So there are sometimes some other type of avenue. So after this question is still a big challenge we try to address, not only with On the Move, but with other networks, is access to information. Because at the end of the day, we say maybe it's the usual people who anyway would have taken part in that kind of meeting. And but still it's interesting to have a look at it. I put in the chat a guide that we updated last year with the support of the Institut Français, which is called Move On. And so it's like the different step to develop your career or your organization internationally. And at the very end, it's a very short, but I hope practical type of guide, even for now and to think beyond. There is a listing of different organization networks platform that can be also useful. And on this as well, I would like to emphasize the importance of workshop, training, mentoring, sometime in different countries. I mean, we see that as well with one of the latest reports by UNESCO. They did a policy report on how country could react and develop funding mechanism to support the sector in the time of pandemic. So the focus is not directly on the internationalization of and cooperation, but still how to help the sector. And this question of supporting also mentoring program or workshop and so on is also interesting. And we see that as well, that sometimes you have calls with online workshop for producer or for arts manager, for instance, to develop projects. So it can be also other way to get into this networking and connection, because of course, an online training will never replace, once again, the real encounter. But at the end of the day, when there is facilitation, some form of connection can be made. And this we could really, as far as we are concerned in different projects, we could really assess this. So maybe these are some avenues. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. And as you said, that also these digital meetings are, or the positive thing about the digital meetings is that we can easily get together, basically. Of course, you have to have specific tools still in order to access meetings like this, and you have to know about these meetings. I think this is a very essential thing, that you need to know about these meetings that we're having now, for example, and then there's still people excluded from meetings like this who simply don't get the information. So I think it's really about also spreading the information about events like these and trainings and workshops in order to to include more people who don't have access yet to international networks. I think this is a really important point. I think maybe for our last 15 minutes, let's try to shift it a little bit more again to the question which we've touched already about, like how, I mean, we were talking about it already, but how can we take the positive things that we are experiencing now in the pandemic? How can we learn from it and follow up on them? I mean, but also like what should funding bodies and policymakers should follow up upon even after the pandemic, like having in mind all the negative effects about mobility, like environmental issues, health issues, societal issues. Like sometimes we just, we have this highly intense mobility. We just go from one place to another and we don't really connect to specific places anymore because time and money is always limited. So all these negative effects, which become louder now, actually, funny enough, in a time where we can't travel and where our highly intense mobility is not even possible, these effects tend to be more on the surface, like in our thinking, and how can we implement them in future funding schemes, and how can we make that stronger towards policymakers and funding bodies. And I was wondering, like, this question goes to everybody, but maybe Marie, from your observation, because you said in the beginning that funding schemes are changing as an answer to the pandemic. And do you see also a change in like supporting this way of mobility, so like a slower mobility? Or maybe I add this at the mobility conference, the Mobility for Creativity conference last year. There was this manifesto, the Slow Mobility Manifesto, spoken out, and so all these things were touched there. And I think that it is more than time now to actually define this slow mobility, and how can we support this kind of slow mobility? What is needed in order to implement that? Big question again, sorry.
It's okay. Big question, and maybe the way I will tackle it is more like so through the example of On the Move. So because of course it's one of the one of the network I know best. No, but joke aside, it's also to say like it's a bit what we say before, that there is not a before and an after. I mean, we are living with it. It's a kind of process. So how can we learn, and how the discussion we can have at this level can also help us to feed other form of discussion that we can have sometimes with funders, policymakers, with other artists in other countries. So it's how we build that. And so Jana, in the introduction, you mentioned as well that this meeting is part of a working group as well. I mean, related to a working group, which is called the Mobility Info Point. So the organization that provides this mostly this administrative support to mobile artists and cultural professionals. We have another working group as part of On the Move, which is more composed of mobility funders, be it at regional, national level, like Wales Art International, for instance, or at a more European level, that the European Cultural Foundation, or the Nordic Cultural Point, which cover the Nordic Baltic country. But we have also Art Move Africa, which is a mobility fund on the African continent. So we have this regular discussion, and it's quite interesting to see a little bit at the first, when we had the first meeting more in June, it was more the first reaction, still the kind of shock and trying to adapt also with people who were already in mobility, people who were stuck in different countries, so how to go back. And now it's more how you already see that some funding scheme are already being adapted, depending, once again, I'm sorry, I repeat it a lot, but depending on the context as well. So you see some mobility funders who now also provide fund for artists or cultural professionals, also to get some better internet connection, for instance, or to work on better quality communication or trailer, for instance, also because it's another way to get more visibility. And also it's how how some of these transversal issues like digitalization, environmental sustainability, how this question can be tackled, but in a longer term perspective, because as some of you, including Alan, say, you know, when we are kind of back to at least some form of mobility, to what extent will all this discussion, you know, get a stop somehow? And here, what I wanted really to highlight, because particularly on this question of environmental sustainability, is like digitalization. Basically, it's not new topics. They have been existing, practiced, and developed for years. But right now, of course, we are facing with some urgency. And what is I mean, at least from the level of the mobility funder, which are part of the group, it's also, as far as this question of environmental sustainability, to think about like more sustainable way to be in mobility and so on. It's also how to contextualize this, because of course it's not the same to depart from Paris than to depart from Malta or to depart from Bucharest, for instance. So just, and also to try to, because here mobility is we see that mobility is much more than the travel. We see it with, you know, all the experience and stories here. But usually when we talk about this question of environmental sustainability, the discussion tend to focus only on the trip and not what is done at the destination, what is done when you come back also to your own community, to your own local context, and what you can bring, particularly in country where access to training, production, touring is so limited. So this is really this question as well that I think is very much addressed at the level of the sector, and Alan knows very well also about that, but also at the level of policy maker and funders, so that we all work also into some form of adapted policies and funding scheme, and not with new form of strict regulation that may exclude even more artists and cultural professionals who are too often excluded from the conversation and which are even more vulnerable with the current crisis, because there is a COVID, but there are also multiple crises which are happening at a national and local level, which add as well a level of complexity. So I think it's all this question also to keep in mind, also in this discussion that we have with the mobility funders. So hence also this importance to collect data, form of impact from the sector, and have a regular conversation, for instance, like this one.
Great, Marie. Thank you for putting this complex issue really clear, and a really clear demands also. Ella, do you take this in, like all these questions and the things Marie pointed out about the sustainability, did or do you take it in consideration with i-Portunus and how you structured the project?
I think with i-Portunus, it's a little bit like what I said before. First of all, we stress that it's demand driven. So in that sense, I really want to stay. The fund stays really flexible towards any project which people come up with, and so in that sense there are I would say there is a lot of flexibility, and I think it's really that we should keep in our heads, that we are not the ones that should define the mobility. I think that's actually the people in the field, and that's why I was also happy to hear both your witness accounts and the interesting projects or suggestions, because this is exactly what I find is should be really necessary. The thing that we can do from our end is more looking at, okay, how can we make this possible? And as I said before, I think flexibility is a really important thing here, but not only flexibility on the short term. I mean, I see that this is also what's happening right now, is there is a lot of panic football and there is a lot of immediate reaction needed towards COVID-19. But as Marie already pointed out, there are many insecurities and precarities that were there before and that only increased. I mean, if there is one thing that we can see from what happened during COVID-19 is that the inequality is only bigger. So there I always am a little bit cautious as well, that we may not forget also what was already a problem, because nowadays what you sometimes see is that people react very harsh on the whole COVID-19 situation, very insistent, which I think it's very good, but sometimes also forget that a lot of these things we have been dealing with this long time before. I think it's also an advantage. As I said, and we hear it in the newspapers all the time. Don't waste a good crisis. In that sense, I think we definitely have some things that were impossible to negotiate before. That are definitely possible to discuss now. And if I think, for example, towards this idea of this consciousness, because I think that was a big problem. So before I worked in i-Portunus, I was artistic director of a residency program, so I know that problematics very well. And what was the problem was the consciousness also, because everybody was like, yeah, we have to do something. But in the meantime, the whole international carousel was just continuing. And I think this is something, if there's one thing that we might take out of this situation, is that this consciousness is definitely fed. And I just hope, and from my end, I will try to do my best to keep on advocating this sort of flexibility and to really advocate this consciousness continuously after the COVID as well, because we absolutely need that.
Thanks, Ellen. This is really very encouraging words, I'd say. And especially during these times that are super difficult, it's good to see also the positive things. And as we said already many times in this talk now, we shouldn't forget all the things we are talking about now. And I think this is why we should start to think how we can actually implement all these issues now, instead of waiting until we can travel again. And then, as Rafaële said, also then maybe we all go back to the old normal, which we all don't want. Maybe Rafaële and Danilo, for you the question: how are these questions, or were they part before the pandemic or now? These questions of like the negative effect of mobility, were they part of your daily work, or do you see any information or support that there's lacking actually in order to travel more sustainable, or be mobile more sustainable, or interact more sustainable?
I think for our part, it would be great that that there is some kind of communication in between venues. For example, when one venue invites a company, that there is an openness, maybe in 2 or 3 different venues, to also program the same work, in order to evitate to just go perform and come back, because this is a lot of time that takes. I mean, it's a lot of time that you lose, and not so much profit of it. And to stay a bit longer in a place gives you the opportunity to meet the dancing there, or to give other how do you say, communities. And I think that would be and it would be great if there is some kind of support for that communication. also for the theaters and for the festivals, that they also have a place of a data or archive of informations where they could get help in the support in that. I think it would be actually helpful for us to travel more, and to I think it would be great to have in festivals also the possibility to stay longer, to have a little residency there in order to have a creative exchange, and not only, I'm not so fond of going in a place and then come back. Then I can also stay home, let's say, you know. So I think it's a lot to take more time for each trip in order to really get something out of it.
As Marie nicely says always, to optimize your mobility experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Danilo.
I would agree with Rafaële. What she said, definitely. This also opened another opportunity for local or regional connections and collaborations. Corona times, but I would also refer on Alan's point of view and then positive impacts of this. I would definitely like to see not just to come back to new normal in a common way, how we used to be, but like definitely internet space is kind of space of equality in a way that, like, for example, this live stream is possible to run from USA or from Germany, as well as from Morocco or some African country. And definitely what I found interesting in this period, that also some artists from let's say third world country got more attention in this way of kind of promoting their work, even if they are not able to travel that much because of, I don't know, social security standards, visa problems, etc. So from my point of view, like, we should definitely take something out of this, and also many institutions, because of COVID time, developed platforms where they kind of let's say put their work on another level, in a way of producing some kind of broadcast, documenting the work in a different way. So I found it as something that could be a part of, let's say, new reality. Not just to cut out all these experiences, but maybe also to keep them, especially because, as we mentioned before, it reaches wider audiences, and like some discussions which are happening in Berlin, for example, why not to be able to be heard all around the world. Not on this level, as Rafaële said, it's quite tiring if you are having daily just new events, but like to keep some of these practices would be definitely positive.
Great, thanks, Danilo. This was already a great closing statement, I felt. So you put it really nicely together already.
Sorry.
And no, it's perfect, great, because it's time actually to end. But if there's anything really important and you felt you didn't touch yet, if you have a last statement or comment, it would be the time now. Otherwise, I think we've touched a lot of important questions and issues. And what I found really nice is that we really, we named the difficult things and the challenges, and especially what we just raised now in the end, that we have to really keep in mind the different context when we talk about making mobility more sustainable. But it's great to see, I think, that there are so many things happening at the moment that we can take as positive effects that we just have to keep in mind now, and we have to really raise our voices to implement these things also in the future, even when we can travel again. So also, as talking from the mobility info point perspective, also for us, I mean, our core mission obviously won't change, to support artists and cultural professionals to be internationally mobile and to give advice and information on that. But we also have to pursue the idea of a slow mobility even more, I think, in our daily work, to also support artists in this direction. So thanks for all the great input. Thanks Marie, Ellen, Rafaële and Danilo for joining. It was a pleasure to talk with you, and thanks Motovila, and thanks to my colleagues of Touring Artists, and also the audience who joined us in this talk, and thanks for your questions and comments. I hope to see you soon in another event, obviously, hopefully very soon also live, but at least digital, it's better than nothing. So,
thank you.
And,
bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.